Yeme architects first went to this building and had a look at what was a really powerful operation that was going on there, and the work that was being done in the community and the work that was being done in what was really a deprived area was really impressive. But when we looked at the building, we could see something that was really deprived, was in a really sort of difficult stage of its life. It was repurposed from an old pub building. It was on multiple levels. It wasn't designed for this use. And ultimately, it didn't reflect the aspirations that the organisations have for the people that used it, but even wider than the people that used it, it was the wider community. And I think one of the reasons that really drew us into the scheme was the fact that there was a interfaith aspect to it, there was a youth engagement aspect to it, there was a community enhancement aspect to it. And so we really felt that this was something that we wanted to be involved in. We wanted to help shape a building that was going to serve all of its needs from a religious perspective, but also would do things that would send messages to the wider community and the non-Muslim community, and also enable it to serve as a long-lasting legacy for this community in Bradford. The design was a really important thing in this because it had to represent something. And for us, it was really about being able to have our clients backing and understanding, and us understanding where we were coming from. One of the key things was that we wanted a building that was going to set the aspiration for an Islamic building, but we wanted it to be something that would speak to the wider community and would speak also to the non-Muslim community. And it would be something that somebody should feel comfortable about going into. There are issues around how many people are engaged in Islam, how many people, young people, are becoming disengaged from Islam. And for us, the building was partly about how we bring together different people at different stages of their faith journey and at different stages of their development journey, and bring them to a space that they feel that belongs to them, that they feel engaged in, and they feel uplifts them and their future. And for us, it was really about us being able to say that from a user experience point of view, this was going to be something that would reflect Islam, but it would also be something that would be grounded in the secular world and the reality of where they're based and where that building is and where it sits. The Islamic elements of the design were something that we wanted to incorporate in a very subtle way. And the way that we approached this was to take what we wanted to be a contemporary British building that fitted in with its British streetscape, but had influences that helped people to recognize its Islamic roots and its aspirations in Islam. So it has got a minaret. It's done in a way that is using fretwork, is using lighting, it is to illuminate, and it could change colours at the time of prayers and so on, so that there's that symbolism around the activity going on within and the symbolism within the architecture. But also things like the windows, where we've used arched fretwork, and we're using Islamic geometric patterns to create these relationships between the square rectangular windows and the Islamic language. So how we bring those two elements together by using complementary designs was a real key focus of how we approach the nature of the design. We wanted the prayer space to be an experience, and that wasn't to be an experience just because of the way it was decorated, but how it made you feel. And for us, that meant us being able to really play with things like lighting and form and height, and how does the glazing create a viewpoint from both within and a directional position inside the prayer hall. So for us, in coming to the design, we were looking at really the direction of the Qibla, how that forms part of the design, how the lighting reinforces that, how the mood lighting creates an ambience that allows people to want to spend time there, feel calm and spiritual in that space, and can feel in a way that they can get close to God in their environment, whether it's busy or whether they're in there by themselves. The entrance into the building has been really carefully designed, and all too often the entrance into mosques is just somewhere to take your shoes off and then go into a prayer hall. However, in this case, what we wanted to do was to create something that would create an introduction to not just Islam and the purpose of this building, but also a multifunction series of other things. So whether that's for gaming, or whether that's for cafes, or whether that's for reading, or it was a multifunction space. So the way that we approached that was, one, to create an introductory area with stage seating that allows people to take off shoes and so on and so forth and sit in an amphitheatre style arrangement. So that creates an introduction to the main hall, and as you come into that space, there's then a grand staircase that goes straight upstairs, which goes to the classrooms and to the teaching areas. And for that to be part of this processional journey to somewhere aspirational was kind of at the heart of where the design went. But ultimately, this initial space that you come into has got a multifaceted use background to it, so that it can be used for prayers, it can be used for religious purposes where necessary, but it could also be a very flexible multi-use space that would do things that the community and the wider community could also partake in. The user journey through this building has been really carefully considered, and it isn't a case of just going to one room and then to another room and then to another room. It's actually thought about an uplifting journey as you go through the whole spaces. One of the key things was to try and create a sense of anticipation around where you go next and what you see when you arrive at any one point. So when you look up from the ground floor lobby, it's a double height space, so that you don't feel that you're disappearing into a room at the top, but you can see that because it's double height. When you emerge at the top, you come into a library space with seating, with books, with a space that allows you to actually transition from outside the activity and animation of the main foyer, and then come into a quieter, softer space, which then helps you transition into the teaching spaces, and then that culminates into an open terrace area with a green space, which allows people to make that connection to nature. So the overall planning of the user journey has been thought out in a way that creates those senses of interaction and uplifting opportunity. So as people go through, it's something that should be engaging, and it should evolve, it should change depending on who's there, depending on what things are put out there, and depending on how things like the creche and other facilities are active and not active, creates a different experience each time somebody goes and uses it. I think the way that the building has been designed in sensitivity to the needs of the women and female users of the building has been at the heart of the proposal, both externally and internally. And the way that the access into the foyer has been designed enables that interaction to happen, and to happen in a way that is managed very carefully. And the use of space has been very carefully dedicated to women. And so it hasn't been secondary spaces and subservient spaces, but actually parts of the main spaces have been dedicated for women. And that's really something that we want to be permanent use and not just occasional use, or not just at times when it's convenient and not being used by others. So I think at the heart of this has been the circulation of how different users would come and use the building and how they would experience it, and for no one to feel any lesser experience because of their gender. The activity space is a key part of the building, which is designed to try and bring together people who are not necessarily using the building as a mosque, but use it as a community building, and really for this building to become the centre of the community. And to that end, having a facility that can be used for a range of different functions was a really key part of what we wanted to achieve. Having something where you could have events with catering, and where there could be things from fitness classes and so on and so forth being held in there within the overall building of being a religious building was a really key part of what we wanted to achieve. The sustainability angle of this building design has been a really important consideration. And not only is this something that is energy saving and good for the environment, but it's an Islamic value. And to that end, it was something that we have to consider really carefully in the design. A sustainability consultant has been employed throughout the design. There's been a real focus on how can measures be taken within the building to enable it to be as efficient as possible, and how can we get something that has got a life cycle running cost that enables it to be something that is as sustainable as possible. One of the areas around things like rainwater harvesting and reuse of grey water and use of solar panels are all things that have been considered in the design to enable the best outcome to be achieved from the building. A building like this sets the benchmark for religious buildings. And when it's located in a place that is challenging, that has got deprivation, that does have issues around child poverty, child obesity, and so on, then the aspiration set out in this building is something that is really powerful. And that's one of the reasons that we got involved, and one of the reasons why we ended up trying to make sure that we did something that was going to reflect the aspirations of not only the organisation itself, but lift the aspirations of the community that would experience things out in the wider community, but don't necessarily experience that within the Islamic community. And for us, bringing that level of aspiration into their Islamic environment was a key consideration.